The sirens inside Rikers Island were already screaming when Michael Harris realized he was trapped. Red emergency lights flashed along the concrete hallway, making every shadow look alive and dangerous. Inmates ran in every direction, shoving past each other, some of their hands over their heads, others screaming and cursing. Smoke from a fire in the laundry room rolled through the air, burning his lungs. Two rival gangs were fighting near the metal staircase, swinging broken mop handles, chains, and anything else they could use. One man fell to the floor, bleeding badly as others stepped over him like he was nothing. Michael pressed his back against the wall, trying to make himself as small as possible. He didn't know who the guards were, or who had started this war inside the prison. All he knew was that he was in the middle of one of the most violent places in America, and tonight it felt like the whole building was ripping itself apart around him. Then everything got worse. A loud explosion echoed from the lower level. Maybe a pipe bursting from the heat, maybe something much worse. The floor shook under Michael's boots, and dust rained from the ceiling. Somewhere in the smoke, a voice shouted, "Don't let them through!" Another voice screamed, "Get down! Get down now!" But Michael couldn't tell who was yelling or where they were. Before he could move, the hallway lights flickered once, twice, and then died all at once. In a second, the world became total darkness. The red sirens cut off. The screams dipped, and for a heartbeat it felt like the prison itself had stopped breathing. Michael stood frozen, pressed to the wall, eyes wide but seeing nothing. He couldn't even hear anyone breathing over the ringing in his ears. Then, from right in front of him in the pitch black, a single scream tore through the silence. Michael's heart slammed at his chest as that scream echoed down the black hallway. It wasn't his voice. It came from right in front of him, from the same direction where he'd last seen the inmate charging with a sharpened piece of metal. His mind raced. Had the man reached him? Was he hurt? Was someone else in the way? His hand shook as he reached out into the dark, fingers feeling only thick air and drifting smoke. In that split second, Michael understood something he'd never truly felt before. This prison did not care if he lived or died. He wasn't a guard. He wasn't an inmate. He was nobody. A simple maintenance worker who had walked into a place where fear and violence were normal. What happened next in that darkness would change everything. But before we see what the lights reveal, we need to understand how Michael ended up inside Rikers Island in the first place. Michael Harris was a 32-year-old janitor from Queens, New York. He lived a quiet life, taking the subway to work, buying cheap groceries, and spending most nights at home caring for his sick mother. He didn't hang out with criminals. He didn't get into fights. He had never even been inside a police station, let alone a prison. To him, places like Rikers Island were just scary stories on the news, headlines about riots, stabbings, and guards who couldn't control the chaos. Everything changed the day the Department of Corrections called him. They said they needed temporary maintenance workers at Rikers to fix broken electrical panels and ventilation units. The pay was more than double what he made as a janitor. With his mother's medical bills piling up, it sounded like the only way to catch up. Without thinking too hard about the danger, Michael said, "I'll take it." He thought it would be just another job. He thought he'd be safe because he wasn't an inmate. He thought wrong. On his first day, Michael walked through the giant metal gates of Rikers Island under a cold gray sky. The air felt heavy, like the whole island was holding a secret. Guards checked him 4 different times before he even reached the main building. They took his phone, his keys, and even his pen. "Nothing sharp," one guard warned. Not even by accident. The man's serious face made Michael's stomach twist, like he knew something Michael didn't. Inside, the sound hit him like a wall. Metal doors slammed, guards barked orders into radios, and somewhere far away, someone shouted in anger. It felt like a loud, crowded city trapped inside concrete walls. Inmates pressed their faces to the cell bars as he walked past. Some laughed, some yelled insults, and some just stared at him with cold, hungry eyes. A short, bald maintenance worker named Frank walked beside him, moving fast. "Stay close," Frank said. "Do what I say and don't talk to anyone unless I tell you. Rikers ain't a place for small mistakes." They started their work in one of the common areas, where inmates played cards, argued about nothing, or paced in tight circles like caged animals. The room was loud and restless. A single guard sat nearby, looking tired, his eyes half on the crowd and half on nothing at all. Michael tried to focus on the broken ventilation fan in front of him. The old metal blades made a horrible grinding sound every few seconds. Frank handed him a flashlight and said, "Hold this steady." Michael leaned in, tried to ignore the feeling of eyes on his back. Then something sharp hit the wall right behind his head. He spun around. A small metal bolt lay on the floor near his feet. Someone had thrown it at him. Before he could react, another bolt rattled against a fan casing, louder this time. Across the room, a group of inmates stared and smirked, amused by his fear. The guard didn't even bother to look up. "Frank," Michael whispered, his voice shaky, "they're throwing things." "Ignore them," Frank muttered without turning around. "Don't give them a reason." But ignoring them was impossible. Michael could feel their eyes crawling over him, studying him, testing him. Every time he bent down to pick up a tool, he expected something else to hit him in the back of the head. The rest of the morning, the threat stayed small. Ugly comments, quiet laughs, slow stares that made his skin crawl. By lunchtime, his hands were shaking so badly he could hardly hold his sandwich. "Does it get easier?" he whispered to Frank. Frank didn't sugarcoat it. "No," he replied flatly. "You just get used to being scared." That night at home, Michael lay awake hearing the echoes of the prison in his head. Slamming doors, yelling voices, and the clink of metal on metal. He wanted to quit, but his mother needed medicine, and the money from this job was the only thing keeping the lights on. So the next day, he went back. On the third day, things felt different the moment Michael walked inside. Frank wasn't there. A guard told him. He called in sick, but the guard's eyes looked strange, like there was more to the story. For the first time, Michael had to work alone. He tried to stay calm as he repaired a broken light fixture in a hallway near the inmate showers. Inmates walked past in small groups, whispering to each other. He couldn't hear the words, but the tone made his skin prickle. One of them stopped just a few feet away from him. The man was tall and strong, his arms covered in tattoos. He stared at Michael for a moment and then asked quietly, "You knew?" Michael froze. "Just fixing the lights," he answered. The man leaned closer. His voice dropped even lower. "Be careful. Some people here don't like strangers." Then he walked away without another word. Sweat rolled down Michael's back. He didn't know if the warning was a threat or a kindness. At Rikers, maybe it was both. Later that afternoon, Michael was sent to repair a fuse box in a lower hallway. As he walked there, he noticed how empty the area felt. No guards nearby. No loud arguments. Just a quiet that didn't belong in a place like this. The air felt wrong, too still, too heavy. He knelt by the fuse box and opened it, pretending everything was normal, but his nerves buzzed like live wires. Then he heard it. One shout. Then another. Then a third, louder than the rest. Voices rose and crashed like a wave building in the distance. Michael stepped out of the hallway and saw inmates running past in every direction. Some carried broken chair legs. Others had ripped metal pipes off the walls. Blood already stained a few shirts. A guard shouted into his radio. "We got a situation in Block C. Lock it down. Lock it." His voice cut off suddenly, swallowed by chaos. Somewhere nearby, a fire alarm began to scream, and smoke poured up from the lower level. Someone yelled a single word that made Michael's blood run cold. Riot. Everything exploded at once. Michael tried to run, but the hallway filled with fighting inmates in seconds. Two men crashed into each other right in front of him, fists swinging wildly. Another inmate smashed a metal pipe across someone's back. The sickening sound made Michael flinch. He ducked behind a concrete pillar as body slammed into walls, and the air filled with curses and screams. Guards tried to push in, but they were outnumbered. Michael watched one officer get knocked down. His helmet rolled away, and his radio was snatched from his belt and thrown across the floor. The guard shouted for help as a group dragged him into the crowd and out of sight. Michael covered his ears, trying to block out the roar. Suddenly, another blast shook the hallway, this one from the direction of the laundry room. Whether it was a pipe, a boiler, or something worse, he didn't know. Flames shot through the open doorway, and thick black smoke rushed out, swallowing the ceiling. The lights above Michael's head began to flicker, turning the chaos into a broken nightmare strobe. On, off, on, off. In those flashes, he saw flashes of faces twisted with rage, the blur of fists and the shine of metal weapons. He pressed himself tighter against the pillar, trying to become part of the concrete. Two men slammed into the wall near him, punching each other so hard that blood sprayed onto the floor. A trash can went flying. Somewhere in the back, someone screamed, but the sound was lost in the noise. Then the lights flickered one last time and went out completely. Total blackness. Michael felt the darkness closing around him, heavy and complete. He couldn't see the fire, but he could smell it. He couldn't see the inmates, but he could feel the heat of bodies rushing past. And in that darkness, he realized it was pinned between a wall and something else, something moving toward him, fast. That was the moment he felt it. A body pressing him to the concrete, an arm trapping him in place. He sucked in a panic breath just as he sensed the armed inmate from before racing toward him to the black, raising a sharpened piece of metal. Michael's breath stopped in his throat. He waited for the impact he couldn't escape, but instead of metal, he heard a scream. Not his own, a different voice right in front of him. Then a heavy thud. For a heartbeat, everything else faded. No alarms, no shouts, just that scream echoing in total darkness. Whatever had just happened in that pitch-black hallway would change Michael's life. But before the lights came back on and showed him who had saved him, and at what cost, the prison itself seemed to groan. Another explosion ripped to the lower level, sending dust and fresh terror into the air. The riot at Rikers Island had only just begun, and Michael Harris was trapped in the very center of it.